present. So this is what they see, and you can hit the next arrow like that, and all the information pops up.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll go to here. So as you read through this section, you can either click next. So democratic elements of ancient Greece. So you're going to read through this right here, and as you do, each time you hit a new subject, click the next arrow, and then when you get to it, it'll go the other. When you're finished, click End Slideshow, and then click up here and click Stop.
Okay.
You ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right, you can begin.
Okay. Soon after the delegates from the 13 colonies signed the Declaration of Independence, they began to tackle the daunting task of creating a new national government. The first attempt, the Articles of Confederation, preserved the state sovereignty at the cost of a weak central government that soon demonstrated its instability to function effectively. 55 delegates met in Philadelphia in 1787 with an aim of reserving the Articles, but quickly realized that only under a new constitution could the central government adequately address the issues plagued the country. Compromise between various interests marked proceedings adequately addressed the issue plagued the country. Compromising between various interests marking proceedings from several historical sources to provide a foundation for the document, which, when finalized, resulted in 3 branches of federal government with 2 House legislators, a strong executive to enforce the law, and a national court system. After the convention had finished its work, proceeding to ratification by state conventions began. Supporters of the Constitution managed, through persuasion and deal-making, to reach the required number of states for ratification. Some conventions agreed to approve the document only if the new government pledged to add several amendments, giving explicit protections of individual rights. The Constitution became the supreme law of the land, and promised amendments of the Bill of Rights. Okay, foundations, Greek and Rome. Through U.S. Constitution, though the U.S. Constitution may be a relatively new document, some of its principles stem from forms of government developed by the ancient civilizations of Greece and Rome. The ancient Greeks, who originated the term, practiced a form of democracy. Although not all residents of Greece could participate, a great segment of the population did not qualify as citizens. Some historians estimate citizens made up only 1/8 of its population. The system did allow for common citizens to have positions of significance in the government. The Greek philosopher Aristotle was one of the first to classify government according to the question, who rules? According to his classification scheme, government ruled by one person would generally be a monarchy or dictatorship. An oligarchy or aristocracy would be ruled by a few, and a democracy would be ruled by the masses. The framers of the Constitution also relied on the concept of a republic as developed by the ancient Romans. The Constitution implied a 3-part system of government, also borrowed heavily from the Romans, who developed systems of checks and balances, as well as the legislative bodies of Assembly of the Senate. The Magna Carta. One of the earliest U.S. constitutions can be found in the creation of the Magna Carta in 1215, compiled by the nobles of the kingdom. Signed the document, King John of England placed himself, as well as future monarchs, under the rule of the law. This established that no government official can be above the law, and as such must follow the written follow written law. The Magna Carta formed the foundation of the English common law, which considered to be basic fundamental legal proceedings, and the Magna Carta formed and traditions as binding precedent. American colonists followed the same rules of laws in establishing colonial legislatures and then a national government. The frames of the United States Constitution considered the Constitution the supreme law of the land, which could not be overturned by subsequent political administrators, just as the Magna Carta stated that no future monarch could take away the rights of the nobles. Perhaps one of the best examples of the influence of the Magna Carta on American government could be found in the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. The Magna Carta says, "No free man shall be taken, imprisoned, or in any other way destroyed, except by lawful judgment of his peers, or by law of the land. No one will we sell, to none we will deny or delay rights or justice." Nearly 6 centuries later, the Fifth Amendment would assert, "No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due processes of the law." Thomas Hobbes, one of the earliest Thomas Hobbes, published in 1651 around the time of the English Civil War. Thomas Hobbes' Levitation attempted to explain the need for development in governments and states. In Hobbes' view, early humans lived in what he called a state of nature, which inevitable and unfettered conflict made life solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. As a result of this conflict, Hobbes asserted that people create a social contract with a more powerful elite society in order to form governments. And these governments, which Hobbes noted were created with the consent of the government, ordered to form government, and these governments were which Hobbes noted were created with consent of the government. Citizens gave up certain rights under natural law. Example, everyone had a right to own all property in order to receive protection under the government. In return, the government would expect all citizens to obey the law. However, nowhere in Leviathan does Hobbes note that the government would be absolutely required to protect the rights of citizens. Other philosophers would later expand on Hobbes' work in order to provide for this protection. John Locke, another English Enlightenment figure who had a large impact on the Constitution, was English philosopher John Locke. His 2 treatises of government generally influenced Thomas Jefferson in writing the Declaration of Independence. Locke expanded on sometimes wrote in terms of conflict with Hobbes' view of the social contract. In Locke's view, not only should citizens rely on the government for protection from harm, but that citizens possessed certain natural rights, including life, liberty, and property. Locke believed that social contracts ensured the government had a responsibility to protect these natural rights of citizens, and in an instance where government failed, so the people had the rights to change the government or abolish and replace it. Montesquieu. The work of Charles de Gondrat, born Baron de Montesquieu, also had a great influence on authors of the U.S. Constitution. A French aristocrat, Montesquieu wrote A Spirit of the Law in 1748, in which outlines 3 types of government, each kept running smoothly according to a specific social principle. Monarchies, led by a heredity of rulers driven by a love of honor, example, rank and prestige. Republicans, which was elected officials to republics, which elected officials rule according to the love of virtue, example, the willingness to put the people before private interest, and despotism, which a ruler relies on the people's fear of his power. Although French Montesquieu admired England's government and believed that incorporating its system of separation of powers, dividing government into branches, each with different functions, made for both effective and efficient government, the frame of the United States Constitution borrowed heavily from Montesquieu's ideas in establishing 3 branches of federal government. Albany Plan of Union. Benjamin Franklin proposed an early attempt at colonial unity in 1754. After several visits to the Iroquois Confederacy of Union, 5 later 6 equal southern tribes under the Representative Council located in present-day northern New York State. In his writings, Franklin frequently promoted the Native American Confederacy as a model for the colonies to follow. Franklin's plans called for the British Parliament to create a general government for the colonies, with a crown-appointed president as well as a Crown Council, a legislative in which wealth determined each colony's representation. In addition, the Albany Plan allowed for confederation that would include both the colonies and various Native American tribes. While these colonies never adopted Franklin's plan, it did serve as a model for subsequent schemes of government, including under the Articles of Confederation and United States Constitution. The Declaration of Independence. In 1776, American colonists had become frustrated with Britain's authority in general, and particularly with taxation laws that they found unfair, especially in light of their lack of representation in Parliament. Colonial militia and British regular troops had skirmished in Lexington and Concord the previous year. Both sides suffered tremendous losses at Bunker Hill. In the summer of 1776, Richard Henry Lee proposed a delegation to the Continental Congress that American colonies declare their independence. The Congress established a committee to create a formal declaration, which selected Virginia delegate Thomas Jefferson to write the declaration. Jefferson's landmark Declaration of Independence did not establish a formal constitution or plan of government, it did note the fundamental rights that John Locke had discussed in the 2 treaties of government. Jefferson specifically stated in delegation's preamble, all men are created equal, while also asserting that they have certain inalienable rights, among these being life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. While later historians and civil rights leaders would debate exactly what Jefferson meant by the former phrase, these documents designed government as the protector of human rights. Subsequently, societies wanting to put forth similar cases for human rights, most notably during French Revolution and the Sine-Qua Declaration of Sentiments from the women's suffrage movement, had borrowed heavily from Jefferson's language in the Declaration of Independence. The discussion questions. Most importantly, number 1, what elements? Most importantly, the Constitution incorporated ancient Greek concepts of democracy, that government's power flows from people who freely vote on issues. The work of Aristotle, especially his analysis of the government according to the question, who rules, also influences the framers. The Constitution, their study of the Roman Republic, held the development of three branches of system of government, a system of checks and balances, and functions of the Senate. What concepts from Enlightenment philosophers influenced the context of the Constitution? Thomas Hobbes' theory of social contract was used in part to establish relationship between citizens and government. First in the Declaration of Independence and later in the Constitution, Hobbes' description of humanity's solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short life is natural state probably weighed heavily on the mind of framers who saw a need for a stronger central government than the Articles of Confederacy had instituted. However, framers also took into account separation of powers also come out into the Constitution. Number three. What American influences included in the Constitution include why might these sources have been included? Two American influence on writing of the Constitution were Franklin Albany's Plan of Union and Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. Franklin's plan purposed a confederation with a legislative and executive branch, while Jefferson's writings of independence influenced the writing of the Independence. Franklin's plan proposed a confederation with legislative and executive branch, while Jefferson's writing on human rights and obligation of power to protect these rights would be evident in the Constitution. The direct participation of these men in the colonial government and the formation of America's founding documents undoubtedly helped to involve their ideas in the process. State Constitution. It gave governors limited political power. As the Revolution wound down, the newly independent states began to rewrite their constitution. Limiting the power to state governors became a hallmark of several of these. Some abolished the office of governor entirely. In contrast, the state legislators received substantial power to run state affairs. The legislators often had the authority to declare war, including conduct foreign policy, set up courts, and perform other common functions. Fearful and skeptical of electoral abilities, the framers of the state constitutions limited the right to male property owners. On the other hand, these framers largely believed that citizens were not entirely subordinate to their legislative officials. Elected offices still had to answer to their constitutions. In several states, Virginia, for example, the Bill of Rights is accompanied drafting of the state constitution, while agreements such as the Magna Carta have preceded the rights of nobles under kings. The new state constitution also guaranteed the right of the citizens against abuse by the legislator. Those states' constitution also included social reforms. Several northern colonies took initial steps towards abolishing slavery. In several instances, the constitutions also provided that small landholders and farmers would have their right in economic interest protected against the interest of larger landholders. The Articles of Confederation. Soon after the Continental Congress approved the Declaration of Independence, it began to work on a written constitution. What it devised, the Articles of Confederation, formally put in two places of the system Continental Congress had been operating under since 1775. There are no presidents, no national executive. The article did not provide for a national court system, while each state could send anywhere from 2 to 7 delegates of Congress. Each state had a single vote, depending on the importance of the legislation. The articles required the consents of 7, 9, or all 13 states. Several states held claims to territory in the Northwest Territory. 5 states did not. States without claims refused to ratify. States with to ratify the articles until they received shares in the territory. Eventually, states without claims compromised with states with claims, and the final holdout states ratified the articles in 1781. The lack of centralized power characterized the shortcomings of the government. Under Articles of Confederation, under the claims of the lack of centralization power characterized the shortcomings under the Articles of Confederation. Designed as the sort of loose alliances, the Articles allowed each one of the 13 states to remain its sovereignty. The national government had no way to enforce national laws or compel the states to do much anything they preferred or not to. The Article provisions. State given sovereignty over central government. The colonists, still fighting the British and American Revolution, did not want to create a new government that introduced a strong central authority. Instead, they ensured the states would have sovereignty over the national government. Therefore, the national government had little power to enforce its own acts. In order to assure equal policies between large and small states, Congress delegates had between 2 and 7 members. However, in Congress, each state had one single vote. Congress did not have the power of taxation, but instead had to rely on state legislators to secure funds necessary to carry out the government policies acts. However, the Articles of Confederation did give the national government certain powers. Congress had the authority to declare war, conduct foreign affairs. In addition, the national government could define weights and measures, establish a system of currency, and act as a final arbiter to disputes between states. Anticipating that Canada might wish to join the Confederacy, the framers also pre-approved Canada for membership. The Article of Complement. Although many began to find fault in the weakness of the government under the Articles of Confederation, that government did make some significant achievements. These included the Land Ordinance of 1785, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, as well as laying basics for framework for the United States, eventually forming the federal government. The Land Ordinance created the effective and esquatable way of surveying, distributing land in the Northwest Territory. The ordinance divided land into 6 square mile blocks known as townships, and then further into 1 square mile sections. The land was then priced for sale at $1 per acre. In addition, the ordinance reserved certain sections for establishing a school as well as raising revenue for the national government. The Northwest Ordinance provided for the formation of no less than 3, no more than 5 states for every Northwest Territory. It also allowed for the establishment of territorial land and later state government in the region. Eventually, 5 new states, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin, were created from the Northwest Territory. The ordinances also prohibited slavery in the Northwest and called for fair dealings with Indians. The Articles of Weakness. The weaknesses. While no nation could point to some significant accomplishment under the Articles, several problems needed to make the new government largely ineffective. Expressly designed to have little authority, the national government could not carry out its duties to protect itself from harm. Perhaps the most glaring problem stemmed from the states formed the state sovereignty over the national government. It relied on states provide its fundings through taxation, but lacked the means to enforce payment. Congress had the power to provide for the common defense, but not enough to raise and maintain. Enough to raise and maintain the common army. If the central government if the central government entered into a war without state support, those states would have no obligation to field troops. In addition, Congress could not regulate trade. Congress cannot regulate trade. Each state had its support. Those states would not have no obligation. Each state had its own currency, and values of money fluctuated widely from state to state, making commerce was nearly impossible. Under Articles, each state had one vote, which frequently meant that the smaller states had an overly large voice under the Articles. Each state government, since much of the legislation coming before Congress required includes superiority. Nine of 13 states or unanimous consent for the passage. A few states could easily block actions supported by the majority, including amendments to the Articles. Articles took guard against single powerful individuals controlling affairs of state. They also failed to recognize that a weakened central government could not function effectively. It would only be a matter of time before it occurred that proved the Articles ineffective and highly necessary for serious revision of the new nation's government. Shays' Rebellion. Frustration over national government's inability to handle economic problems erupted in Massachusetts, what eventually would be called Shays' Rebellion. Massachusetts, and what eventually would become the rebellion occurred when Massachusetts state legislation began to pass tougher tax laws that required middle-class farmers and others to pay taxes in gold and silver, not paper money. Farmers protested by holding meetings, but the state government would not yield, causing for revisions to the Massachusetts state constitution. Thousands of aggressive farmers marched on several area courthouses. A farmer named Daniel Shays led one of these marches. As the protest quickly escalated, Congress became concerned that events in Massachusetts had spiraled out of control and sought to increase the size of the army to cool the protests. Unable to do so, Congress found itself powerless to stop the rebellion. However, Massachusetts Governor Bodion took matters into his own hands by raising a militia and stopping the rebellions in an attempt to seize federal arsenal at Springfield. Four farmers died and several others were wounded. After forces under Governor Bowen crushed the rebellion, Shay managed to flee to Canada. However, 2 rebels were hanged for their role, while several others had death. Hanged for their role, with several others that had their death sentence commuted. Many other rebels lost their civil liberties for time as a result of their involvement. The most serious consequence was the revolt that several leaders of the independence movement became concerned that nationalist government and inability to quell the rebellion had endangered the gains and made the revolution. In regards to forming a new government, many leaders of independence movement saw as stark terms that something had to be done to strengthen the Articles of Confederation. Discussion questions. 1. Why did the government under the Articles first seem effective in the years immediately following the Revolution? The leaders of the Revolution felt that British government had acted oppressively in dealing with the colonies and did not want to replace it with a similar government of their own creation. Therefore, they wanted central government with less power and therefore control, and sought preserving the sovereignty of the individual states safe. Less power. Number 2. What were the characteristics of state constitution? State constitution created during the period after American Revolution. What were some of the main Revolution? The state constitutions that developed during the Revolution had several specific characteristics. They included the power to declare war, conduct foreign policies, and set up courts. In addition, they had limited rights to vote. Limited to the right to vote to male property owners. Elected officials were responsible to their constituency. Several states incorporated a Bill of Rights. Some even introduced social reforms such as abolition of slavery and protection of the rights of smaller landholders against larger ones. Number 3. What were some of the main achievements of the Articles? What major weaknesses made the Articles ineffective? 2 main achievements of the Articles of the government included the Land Ordinance of 1785, which established a system for the sale, survey, and distribution of land in the Northwest Territory, as well as the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, which allowed for the formation of new states as well as the creation of governments in the Northwest Treaty. However, the weakness of the Articles made effective government under them extremely difficult. Congress had little power to compel states to follow the policies of the central government. Each state had a single vote in the legislature. Amendments to the Articles require unanimous consent. Congress could not raise an army for regulate trade. Finally, there is no court system or executive branch. Number 4. What impact did Shays' Rebellion have on concerns about government under the Articles? Shays' Rebellion arose from the attempt by Massachusetts farmers to reduce the taxes levied by the states. While Massachusetts officials eventually quelled the rebellion with the use of private militia, many recognized the central government as designed could not effectively react to such situations, planting seeds for a revision of the Articles. Revising the Articles. Early attempts. One of the earliest attempts for solving the problems of the Articles took place at George Washington, Virginia home, so-called Mount Vermont Conference, where representatives from Maryland and Virginia met in an attempt to settle a dispute over the use of the Potomac River. Delegates from Mount Virginia met to propose a conference of the 13 states to discuss the issues related to the conference. The Mount Vermont meeting led to a conservation Annapolis, Maryland, and several states, including Maryland, did not send delegates. However, one of the delegates did attend. Alexander Hamilton proposed the following meeting in Philadelphia in order to correct problems in the Articles of Confederation themselves. The Annapolis delegate supported Hamilton's proposal, and Continental Congress quickly approved. The Philadelphia Convention. At the start of the Philadelphia Convention, May 25, 1787, 55 delegates from 12 of the 13 colonies began considering regarding the revision of the Articles of Confederation. Rhode Island refused to send delegates, and some more famous figures from the Revolution did not or would not attend. For example, Thomas Jefferson was in France serving as the U.S. ambassador. Patrick Henry, on the other hand, smelt a rat, suspecting that the revision of the Articles of Confederation would grant a central government too much power, and chose not to attend. Two of the New York delegates walked out during the convention, leaving Hamilton as the state's lone delegate. The Philadelphia Convention, Democrats. Delegates from Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Convention had many things in common. First, most were wealthy and had significant economic interest in the convention's outcome. Some historians have speculated that ultimately the Constitution served more to protect their economic rights than establish a plan of government. Nearly two-thirds of delegates had law degrees, and 40 had served in the Confederation Congress, knowing firsthand the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. More than half, including Washington and Hamilton, had served as officers in the Continental Army during the American Revolution. Some had in the Continental Army during the American Revolution. Some of the delegates had been state governors. 8 had signed the Declaration of Independence, while some older delegates, such as Washington and Franklin, did have prominent roles. Most of the delegates were relatively young. Their average age was just 42, while several of the more illustrious delegates, such as Alexander Hamilton and James Madison, were in their 30s. Discussion questions. 1. Why were the Mount Vermont and Annapolis meetings called? How effectively do you think they were? The Mount Vermont Conference came about when George Washington invited representatives from Virginia, Maryland to visit his home in an effort to settle disputes over commercial use of the Potomac River. Delegates at the Mount Vernon meeting proposed a conference of all 13 states to discuss the issues related to commerce under the Articles, which took place in Annapolis and Maryland. Although this convention failed to produce its intended results, especially in light of the fact that several states did not bother to send delegates, New York delegate Alexander Hamilton suggested that a second meeting be held in Philadelphia during the summer of 1787. The speculative address weakness in the Articles of Confederation. Number 2. For what purpose was Philadelphia Convention originally called? What was the make-up of its delegates? The Philadelphia Convention was originally called to address problems with the Articles of Confederation. It became obvious early on that weaknesses in the system made simple revisions impossible, and that a whole new document was necessary. Most of the 55 delegates who attended the convention were men of wealth and promotion. Most were lawyers. Over half had been officers in the Continental Army during the American Revolution. 7 had been state governors. Most were relatively young, with an average age of 42. Profiles. James Madison. Perhaps no member of the Constitutional Convention provided more instrumental than James Madison, a Virginia delegate who had since received the title of Father of the Constitution. Madison sat on various committees at the convention, missed very few of its proceedings, and also devised of the Virginia Plan, which included 3 branches of government with a number of representatives from each state on the population. Though with relatively poor Though a relatively poor orator, Madison spoke in debates more than 150 times. He took copious notes during the proceedings, which have been used to help interpret the framers meant by various parts of the document. He also led the fight over the Constitution's ratification by Virginia, also along with Hamilton and John Jay, producing The Federalist, a set of essays designed to sway opinion in favor of ratification. When the addition of the Bills of Rights became a ratification issue, Madison authored 10 amendments, which became the Bill of Rights. Profiles. George Washington. All of the convention delegates, none had greater fame or had earned more respect than George Washington, already legend for his military endeavors as the head of the convention army. Constitutional Army. He seemed a logical choice for a president of the Constitutional Convention. In light of his experience in the Virginia House of Burgesses, his work in Mount Vernon meeting between Maryland and Virginia, and his support for the recent Annapolis Convention, Washington did not speak much during the proceedings, but accounts his active role in working behind the scenes, guide the documents through various debates. Washington's ability to commanding and presence soon made him overwhelmingly favorite of the nation's first president. Profiles. Benjamin Franklin. Although the most influential elder statesman at the Constitutional Conference was Pennsylvania's Benjamin Franklin. Already in his 80s, Franklin's managed to travel to Philadelphia in most, if not all, session of the convention. While Franklin did not personally approve all the sections of the document, he still lent his considerable presentation to ratify to the ratification process. He also gave an impassioned speech at the end of the Constitution Convention, urging his fellow delegates to sign the Constitution. In addition, Franklin is noted for his Rising Sun speech, given at the end of the convention. Noting the sun painted on the back of Philadelphia Convention, President Washington's chair, Franklin supposedly noted the other delegates the difficulty for an artist to defiantly portray rising or setting of the sun. Franklin, too worn out by this time to deliver his own speech, asked a fellow delegate to remark that Franklin had the happiness to know that the new nation is rising and not a setting sun. Profiles. Alexander Hamilton. A military leader and aide-de-camp to George Washington during the Revolution, Alexander Hamilton continued to stay active in politics after the end of the war. As an attendant of the failed Annapolis Convention, Hamilton proposed the delegates meet in Philadelphia to correct problems with the Articles of Confederation. Hamilton, the convention's only remaining delegate from Philadelphia to correct problems with the New York, was among those advocated to a strong central government. During the convention, Hamilton characterized both the Virginia Plan and the New Jersey Plan for representation as insufficient, as insisting that some compromise be reached, out of which emerged Roger Sherman's Connecticut Compromise after the convention of Hamilton.
All right, go ahead and hit save. Hit end show. Hit right there. Click stop recording.